says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me, as always, to break down everything Parramatta, everything NRL is my good mate, Sixties. Sixties, it's a pleasure to have you on board, mate. It's a pleasure to be back to normal broadcast sort of schedule for the Tip Sheet. All those Thursday night football games, not quite a thing of the past. We've still got the penultimate round of the season for Parramatta to get through, but we are back to somewhat regular scheduling.
And probably in a more digestible podcast format, because we shouldn't last 2 hours in this news one, as we have been with the news/preview podcasts of the last month or so. So, mate, I'm ready to get into the news segment and the news podcast, mate.
Yes, sir. But before we get into the podcast 60s, a reminder to our listeners that the Tip Sheet is brought to you in partnership with star partners Parramatta, Narellan and Auburn, as well as Big Swing Golf Northmead. Both those companies doing wonderful things for TCT, and a pleasure to have them on board. But let's get into the news, 60s.
News team, assemble!
And first cab off the rank is the biggest news involving the Tip Sheet itself, 60s. And it's someone coming on board, given that Spiro is now a very, very busy man. We had to find someone worthy of replacing him. I think we've done a good job because listeners of the Tip Sheet will know this voice, and readers of TCT will appreciate his wonderful long-form content that he's done for us over the years. Clint, welcome on board to the Tip Sheet, mate. How you doing?
Very well, gentlemen. And yourselves?
Mate, I would be better on the back of an Eels win, but the season is what it is. We're going to be really pumped to get a victory against the West Tigers this weekend, but there's so much news we've got to get through, and of course that's going to kick off with the team lists that have just been announced.
Yeah, let's get right into it, boys. Round 6 is upon us. Eels playing their traditional Easter Monday clash against the West Tigers. We're going to go through the team list quickly. Look at the West Tigers first, though, given that they've got plenty going on in their own backyard. Starting at fullback, they've got Charlie Staines. On the wings, Asu Kapoa and Junior Tupu. Brent Nade and Stafford To'a are in the centres. Adam Duahi or Dewey and Luke Brooks in the 6 and 7 respectively. In the front row, Stefano Latoy-Kamanu, David Clemmer and Apiasai Coruscant at dummy half. Isa Isaiah Papali'i on one edge. John Bateman, who's actually been quite good for the West Tigers, to be honest, on the other. And Fanua Pole at lock forward. Jake Simpkin, Alex Twal, Joe Ofengahi and Sean Bloor round out their interchange. Their extended roster, Justin Matamua, Alex Seyfarth, Brandon Wakeham, Rua Ngatakura, and Dane Laurie, the final reserve there. Not pretty reading, but I feel like we said the same thing about that last year on Easter Monday, and they managed to knock us off. But yeah, the Tigers are doing it tough, boys.
Is it arguably the best side that they've assembled this season?
Yeah, look, I personally, when I saw the team sheet, I went, that'll be about the best 17 they've put out this year, and right on cue in time for us.
It's got a lot of holes, that roster, hasn't it? And, you know, I say that knowing full well they're going to be up for this game on Monday and they're going to give us as much hell as they can. But you can see why they're winless to start the season. There is a distinct lack of talent in some key positions there for the West Tigers.
Well, let's just use the yardstick of Parramatta's performance against the Panthers. So if we're going into this being concerned about things that we shouldn't be concerned about, now I'm not talking about disrespecting the Tigers outfit in any way, but I think we have to have a positive mindset, the players that is, realise what they achieved against the Panthers. Now, if you put the Panthers up against the Tigers, what sort of scoreline would you expect at the moment?
50 plus.
Yeah,
40 plus at least.
But the Panthers also have a aggression and ruthlessness to them that you can argue that Parramatta sometimes lack.
Yeah. Now, the one thing that we have to guard against, and we did see it last year, and we've seen it from time to time over the last few years, is playing down to the level of the opposition. Now, we don't want to get into this too much at the moment because we will have the preview podcast later in the week and we'll be expressing our thoughts a bit more on the match itself. But I want to take a positive mindset about what lies in store, and maybe that's the ideal time now to dig into our team list.
Yeah, let's get into it, but preface it first with the news coming out of the judiciary last week that Bailey Simonson will accept a 2-week ban for his high tackle on James Tedesco. No surprises there, I think, boys. And I think 2 weeks is probably fair in relation to the nature of the tackle mechanically. He didn't leave his feet, he didn't swing an arm recklessly, but he did collect Teddy high. And thus, I think the 2-week suspension probably within the realms of reason.
Yeah, Clint, what's your thoughts on
that? Yeah, I tend to agree there. 40. Look, it looked dramatic when it happened, and naturally we heard a little about it in the post-match presser from Roosters coach Trent Robinson. But I think 2 weeks is about right. And when the charge came out, there wasn't any surprises from my end.
Yes, indeed. So let's get to the Eels team list bearing that news in mind. No Bailey Simonson, no Junior Barlaw, Junior due back next week, thankfully, and obviously Bailey the week after that as he serves the 2-week or 2-leg suspension. Going through the Eels team list, though, as always, at fullback Quinton Gufferson. On the wings or left wing, it's Mike Acevo. Right wing, what a welcome return in the first grade, Hayes Dunster. It's been well over a year since he had that awful knee injury that led to a full knee reconstruction, but he's been playing some great football in reserve grade. And even without the Simonson suspension, he would have made it a fair question mark this week in terms of form. So saves Brad after the decision. He comes in on opportunity via injury, but he's been playing some great football. In the centres, Will Penasini will be on the right with Hayes, you presume, with Sean Russell replacing Wanga Blake on the left. Wanga being dropped, looks like, on form. No surprises there. We spoke about it, 60s. He has been struggling, but Sean Russell, he is a very welcome sight for sore eyes there, given that he was out for an undisclosed amount of time following what we suspect was a shoulder injury at training.
Yeah, it was. And I should also mention that during the pre-season, we know that Wanga Blake had a broken arm, and we saw Sean Russell filling in from time to time in opposed sessions in that centre position that Wanga was vacating due to his injury and doing the rehab. So it's not entirely foreign for that sort of combination to be taking the field. I guess Brad Arthur's someone that doesn't normally like to make too many changes. In this instance, the extra change or two's been forced with the suspension. But yeah, it'll be good to see how those combinations shape up in the game itself.
How do you see that new look backline, Quint?
Look, gentlemen, I think the first thing we have to acknowledge is the extreme work and great work of Hayes Dunster and our strength and conditioning team, our physical performance team, to get Hayes back into a position where he can be selected for first grade. Any physio will tell you the triple, as it's known, ACL, MCL, PCL, is one hell of an injury to return from. So congratulations to Hayes and the team for getting themselves into a position. As you rightly touched on, his form in New South Wales Cup warranted a discussion about his selection in first grade, and I, for one, absolutely welcome his return. I think he's going to give us something a little bit different out of the backfield. Hopefully, some meters. His post-contact meters stats in New South Wales Cup since returning have been getting progressively better each and every week. And he's a footballer, and the same can also be said for Sean Russell. These are instinctive footballers. These are guys that come through our junior systems and are Parramatta people. I'm excited to see them take the field.
No changes in the halves, no surprises there either. Dylan Brown 5'8", Mitchell Moses halfback. In the front row, it's the same configuration as last week, which means Reagan Campbell-Gillard and Wiremu Greg will start, bookending Josh Hodgson at dummy half. And then in the back row, we see one of the greatest Easter returns of all time, Sean Lane, making a very, very, very timely comeback from a broken jaw. He's going straight back onto that left edge where he'll partner Dylan Brown. Bryce Cartwright, however, has not been the loser of his return. Bryce been in a very, very good form of, or vein of form himself, playing really tough, honest football. He switches over to the right edge with Ryan Madison going from right edge to lock forward, so a bit of a shuffle there. And that shuffle cascades down to the bench where Jermaine Hopgood moves from starting lock forward to the interchange. Brendan Hands continues to play that dummy half utility role. Jack Murchie and Makahesi Makatoa round out our impact forwards. Matt Dury, the poor soul to make way in that big reshuffle. Dury can probably count himself hard done by, but there's a lot of quality players in that team this week. And joining Dury on the extended roster is Jake Arthur, Offie Ogden, Kai Rodwell, and Wonga Blake. Yeah, big facelift to the forward pack, big injection of talent. Shaun Lane, we know how important he is to this team, boys. Do you like what Brad Arthur's done reconfiguring that team around Lane's return? Would you have done it differently, or do you think there's a little something to how he's put it up on the bench in the starting back row there?
I'll let you fire in there first, Clint.
Yeah, look, personally, if it was me, I would have made exactly the same decisions when it came to the starting 13. I think as effective as Jermaine Hopgood has been for us, and he's had a good highlights reel, and there'd be some super coaches out there lamenting his decision, Brad's decision to move Jermaine to the bench. But I think experienced player in Ryan Madison starting and helping support and tighten that middle third along with Reg is the way forward, particularly with Junior out at the moment. Also give Jermaine the opportunity to come into the game, and he's going through his first full season of NRL. That's something that we can't forget, and his minutes need to be managed. Shaun Lane is one of our best forwards. He at the back end of last year, he was obviously in that rich vein of form, and re-signed on a long-term deal with the club. He's remunerated accordingly. You'd expect someone of his caliber to come immediately into the starting side if they're available. Now, whether he plays the full 80, yet to be seen, and maybe his minutes might need to be managed, but I expect a good showing from Shaun.
I'm interested in the form of Shaun Lane coming back from a broken jaw. Now, Bryce Cartwright suffered a broken jaw during the pre-season and had to be available for round one, really due to the circumstances. I'd maybe in a perfect world, if everyone was available, he might have come back through New South Wales Cup with that sort of injury. As it's turned out, having been selected in first grade, it's the old cliche of he's made every post a winner. Since then, there's been no evidence at all of him being, I guess, a bit gun shy with his carries into contact with his jaw. And that's the second time that he's come back from that. Now, we could suggest that Shaun Lane is so tall that people are going to have to be stretching to get up to make contact with his jaw. And if anyone has ever had the opportunity to talk to Shaun Lane in person or to meet him, you know what I mean about how tall the man is. He has to be. I honestly cannot recall ever speaking to an NRL player as tall as Shaun Lane, and it catches me by surprise every time I see him. He did indicate a couple of weeks ago at the Parramatta Junior Rugby League season launch that he was going to be ready for this Easter round. Sean Russell said the same during the interviews that I conducted with both of them. And they seem very relaxed about it as well. I think Sean's a player who really understands himself a lot better now that he's an experienced player at the Parramatta club. He had a lot to say about Parramatta being his home and the reasons for playing his best football now, that he had some coaches before that didn't really understand who he was as an individual, and that Brad Arthur's been really good at understanding who he is. And he also indicated that he thought that the team had been very good at bringing out the best in Brad Arthur as well, helping him to relax a little bit in his more recent years. But Shaun, as I said, Shaun is he's a bit of a character. He likes a joke. He likes to be relaxed, but he's all about having that positive mindset. And he's critical of himself for not having that positive mindset in the past. I probably can't see him doing anything else but coming into the game with a spot-on attitude to his return to football. The question mark that I have is around Hopgood coming off the bench, and I wonder then whether BA is looking to unleash him as an impact player, and that he's had to do an awful lot of tackling, an awful lot of work that I think has started to diminish what he offers as an attacking weapon in the middle. And maybe that's what BA's thinking might be as well.
Yep. So with Sean, we know he's going to be a little bit underdone. That's the reality of missing, 2.5 months of football following a broken jaw. He obviously would have been doing cardio work, but it doesn't quite make for real game experience in terms of fitness. So the Eels are going to have to juggle around that. But speaking of juggling, looking at this front row rotation, we saw Rumu try his absolute guts out against the Sydney Roosters and have a pretty handy game, honestly. But when he gets subbed out 15 to 20 minutes into a game, is it Ryan Madison shifting into the front row, boys, or is it Makatoa coming into the starting team? So you get Hopgood into the game at that point and then push Madison one up into the front row, or do you get Makatoa into the front row rotation and then look to get Hopgood in separately?
Clint, I'll leave that to you first.
Oh, you could go either way. Part of that will probably be dictated by the way that the match is unfolding. If there's an opportunity and we're on the attack, and hypothetically, if we're up and there's an opportunity to go for the kill, I think you see Hopgood come in. If it's a little bit more of a war of attrition and the game's in the balance still at that point, you might want someone who's got the motor of a Makatoa to come on and just ensure that the middle stays tighter. But if it's me, boys, I'm probably still bringing Jermaine on, and at the end of the day, they're all middle forwards, and they all have their skills and their unique skills that they bring to the team. And with the benefit of having both Ryan and Jermaine on is that you've got two legitimate passing options within the middle third of the field.
I'm with you there. I'm thinking that it's Maddo going to the front row and Jermaine coming on at lock. But yeah, it could be a case of it changes up according to the match, or maybe BA's just thinking completely different to what we are, and he's got plans that middles are replacing middles. By that I mean Makatoa coming on and replacing Woody when he comes off. Again, it's interesting. It was always going to be an interesting team list Tuesday. BA didn't disappoint with that. We probably saw more changes than we have in any Brad Arthur coach team in the past. So it now remains to be seen how he uses his interchange bench this week, because there are plenty of options available for him.
And just on that, Wonga Blake getting dropped, not surprising, boys. We've spoken about his struggles. Hopefully a stint in reserve grade can reignite his form. We know he's still a world-class athlete. He just needs to get back to his best mentally. But in terms of the other player dropped, Matt Dury, hard done by or the right player to drop, boys? And is there a silver lining to him going to reserve grade where he can maybe pump more minutes into those legs as the starting back rower?
Clint, you were a massive Matt Dury fan when he was coming through the junior rep system.
Yeah, it was, Craig. And what we some of the glimpses that we've seen throughout first grade from Matt in an Eels jersey is probably how his full matches were unfolding in junior reps. Look, I think this is a management of minutes. It's well documented that Brad wants his edge players to have the ability to play 80 minutes. It was documented through the preseason that some of our new buys in Jack Murchie and Matt weren't quite there in relation to that. And I think this is very much a get 80 minutes under your belt. Let's see how you go. I have no doubt that he'll be back in the 17 at some point in the coming weeks anyway. This could very well just be, in my mind, a matter of managing Matt's minutes.
Well, I know in terms of Matt Dury that probably in recent years, outside of injury, that I doubt that he's played 80-minute games for a long, long time. So it's I think it is a case of getting some minutes under his belt in the New South Wales Cup. And talking about lower grade matches, in going back to get a bit of confidence, a bit of form in the New South Wales Cup, one Jake Arthur has certainly been in outstanding form this season, and we saw that in the way that he was able to get the Eels back from the brink of defeat against the Dragons on Saturday down in Wollongong.
Yeah, Eels trailing, I believe, 22-12 with under half an hour to play, 60s. And then Jake really took control of this game, spearheaded the last couple of tries with some wonderful kicks to Zach Sini and Hayes Dunster. The Dunster one in the 79th minute, giving Jordan Rankin a chance to win the game from the right sideline. Unfortunately, the captain couldn't ice that conversion down in Wollongong from the far sideline. So 26 all the full-time score there. But it was good to see the boys salvaging a draw from that situation, and Jake really at the heart of that.
Well, the last couple of weeks, they've managed to get some victories under pretty difficult circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, they had to come back from behind against the Sea Eagles up at Blacktown. And again, Jake was instrumental in that comeback. And then the next week, they defeated the almighty Penrith Panthers,
reigning premiers,
New South Wales Cup team, the reigning premiers. Yes, so that was a really big win. So
and look, that was
away.
I was going to say Brad Arthur made it quite public that he wanted Jake playing 80 minutes in reserve grade this year, and they've stuck true to that. And he's starting to really hit his straps because of it.
Yeah, so they've now gone, after losing the first two rounds, they've won two and then had a draw.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, the circumstances of that match up at Blacktown, they had a lot going against them there. And as you said as well, they had the opportunity to win that game at the end against the Dragons with that try conversion that was missed. So,
and then 26 all, keep the Eels in the hunt for the top 8. And then continuing with the weekend wrap quickly, though, we go to the Jersey Flag, who are really the surprise packets, boys. Looking at that roster they had in round 1, I mean, there were names you recognised, there were names we didn't. Had to really wait and see what they were doing. They started slow, but they've really come to fore in the last couple of rounds, playing wonderful team-focused football, getting to their kicks and sets, playing aggressive in defence. And that was put with a real big punctuation mark this week with a 32-16 win of the Dragons that probably flattered the Dragons' 60s. Terrell Williams bagging a hat-trick in this one with Jock Brazel, Ned Hicks and William Latu also scoring. But yeah, the Eels really, I mean, for that grade of football, what they're doing under Coach Craig Brennan is very, very impressive.
It is, because they've probably haven't had access to some of the players that we expected that they would. There's been some players held back in the SG ball competition, and that even includes Ethan Sanders, who was the starting halfback all through last season. And from memory, he was either the player of the player of the season, or he was right up the top of the player of the season selections. But they have really, you know what, again, it was that matchup at Blacktown against the Sea Eagles. And in that game, man, the decisions were going against them. There were some calls that were head scratching, but they overcame adversity. It was the first time that we saw Lindsay Munro in action, the halfback. I have got that right, haven't I? It is Lindsay, isn't it?
Lindsay Munro, yes.
Yes. So he's actually been a revelation, because we had earlier seen that Arthur Miller-Stephen was the fullback in the Jersey Flag and was elevated to New South Wales Cup, where he unfortunately got an injury. And when he was elevated to New South Wales Cup, that gave that opportunity to Lindsay Munro, who had trialled for the Eels, I believe, towards the end of last year, and had impressed people. If you are thinking about what he looks like, I think he's almost a clone of Ewan McGrady, the Canterbury half from all those years ago that won the Rothmans medal. He is an absolute whippet around the field. He's fast. He bobs up on both sides of the ruck. He trails players through. He injects himself into the back line with great pace. He delivered a wonderful pass for a try last week, but there was also his involvement in what was the second try of the day for the Jersey Flag, and it was an absolute cracker. It's available on the New South Wales Rugby League highlights, so you can see the Jersey Flag highlights. You go to about 140 for Parramatta, and their second try, it starts off with a storming carry from Nick Lanaz through the middle of the ruck, followed by an offload, and then the offloads just continue, and it finishes with Jock Brazel getting over the line. And at any point, the play could have come to a halt, but they just kept turning up in support. The passes kept coming. It was a tremendous try. A player that I'm going to keep my eye on at the moment is a middle forward coming off the bench named Noah Reid. I thought he was outstanding in this game. Like I don't know what his post-contact meters came out like, but it had to have been something enormous. 6'5" prop, originally with the Newcastle Knights, was a member of their Harold Matthews Cup winning team back in, I think, about 2019. From memory, he's now finds himself at the Eels. He can't be any older than about 19, like maybe turning 20 later this year, by my calculations. But I think he's very, very promising as a middle forward. So keep your eye on him. We like to track different players coming through the grades. To me, he's one to keep an eye on.
Clint, the team was 0-2 after 2 rounds. Did you have him, or were you surprised to see him go 3-0 since?
Yeah, look, it probably is a little bit of a surprise, to be honest with you. It was touched on before. There was a lot of new faces coming into this squad, as well as some of those boys that are, they were key members of the side, certainly in the back end of last year, that have been kept down in the SG ball grade. So see them go 3-0 after that rocky start. Paints a really positive picture of the future. We've got some good kids there, and Craig touched on my like of Matt Dury as he was coming through those grades. So I think young Jock Brazel is Craig probably holds him in very similar regard.
Oh, he will be an NRL player. I'll just put that on the table right now. He's going to do a preseason next year. I suspect, I'm thinking he might have a development contract, but don't quote me on that. But he will do an NRL preseason last year again, and I would suggest that he might be part of the full-time squad in some capacity. And the way he's come back this season, Jock, after missing all of last year, he had that great misfortune of the last session before Christmas in 2000, at the end of 2021, the last play of the last session, the last tackle of the last session, and he does his knee.
And Jock just plays with his hair on fire, doesn't he? He's a maniac out there. Just gives 100% to every aspect of his game. So, like you said, 60s, the only thing that's going to stop him from carving out a pretty handy NRL career will be injury. So we'll just knock on wood there for him, because he's making a very strong return from that serious knee injury. Let's keep it running. Let's go down to the junior representative pathways now. Let's start with the Lisa Fiala Cup 60s, because they had a fantastic closeout to their 4-week campaign, being one of only 2 teams to go through the entire program undefeated in 2023. They won 32-10 over the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs on Saturday out at Belmore, I believe this one was. No, yeah, it was Belmore, yeah. So we got a double to Ariana Rualt. You got Essence Allo, Kayla Henderson, Logan Lamusu, Rivalry Arlo, and Waiaria Ellis also scoring. And really, really good capstone game on a fantastic campaign.
Yeah, they've gone, as you mentioned, they've gone through undefeated. Their aggregate score is something like 154-20. That will give you an idea. And 10 of those 20 points just came in the
so half their match. Against was conceded. Just
incredible.
Now.
Yeah. So they look very well coached. The girls play with a lot of confidence, and I'm expecting. I'm not quite sure of the age of all of them, whether in relation to how many will come up into the Tasha Gale squad for next season, or whether they blood them a little bit in terms of doing the pre-season with the Tasha Gale squad. But without doubt, there's some talent there. The prop forwards, the twins, they have caused mayhem in opposition sides this year. So, yeah, keep your eye on them.
Toya Alamalo girls, I believe it is, 60s.
Yes.
Alianne and Adiza or Adetza. So, fantastic campaign for the Lisa Fiala Cup. Really looking forward to seeing them go into the Tasha Gale. Speaking of, let's get into the junior reps there, boys. And before we get into the individual results, massive congratulations to all three teams, because for the first time since the inception of the Tash Gale way back in 2018, all three junior representative teams for the Parramatta Eels have qualified for the final series in the same season. So massive milestone for the club and a testament to the hard work of all three programs. So well done.
Yes, and it was split venues as well this
what
weekend.
What a mess this was everywhere. So
we had our plans to cover these matches as best we could, mate, and it just didn't quite work out because we planned to split between Belmore and over at Granville Park, the Eric Tweedale Stadium, and then of course the Tarsha Gale was then moved to Acor Stadium as one of the curtain raisers for the Bulldogs match there on Sunday night. And then I would imagine that with the weather that they decided to move that off Acor and then to Kellyville Park. So eventually the girls took the field at something like 3:45 at Kellyville Park on Sunday afternoon. So now the advantage of that is there was no pressure on them because they knew that the worst they could finish was 6th.
Courtesy of a Penrith loss on Saturday, exactly. So they booked it, or they punched their ticket to the finals, but they were taking on the absolute, out of nowhere really in terms of last year, 2022 to 2023, but we saw in the preseason, and we knew they were going to be competition favourites, the Canterbury Bulldogs, who were just a tremendous team in this grade. They had a run through into the last round of the regulation season undefeated, and that was no surprises for us Sixties. And after
I was just going to say, what they produced on Sunday was every bit as good as what we saw in that trial. I would imagine it's what they've produced for most of the season. There were a couple of interesting closer results, and I'm not quite sure how a couple of the teams got within cooey of their side as they did. Yeah. But they really flexed their muscle on the game on Sunday. The Eels put up such a fight. The first 20 minutes, there was no score. And the Eels scramble was just doing their utmost to try to hold them out. It was always going to be that the Bulldogs had the ascendancy. They are fast. They are physical. They are skillful. If you get a chance to see them in action, they are quite a team to watch. Now, I think they've been assembled from far and wide. So they have well and truly been hand-picked, I believe, but you have to sit back and admire football played like they do. And there were times you just had to clap for the tries that they scored. They finally broke the Eels back because they got back-to-back sets, and it was unfortunate because the Eels were ruled to have made a high tackle on the 6th when the Bulldogs ran it from about 40 metres out. And the Eels caught him on the 30-metre line. The referees had judged it was a high tackle. They've then been able to get into the quarter, and then it was just too much for the Eels to hold out. And then they ended up scoring 4 tries in that 10 minutes before half-time and 2 tries in the 5-6 minutes after half-time. And that was pretty much the scoring.
Save for a 58th-minute try. That was it.
That last try would have been in what would have been their last possession. And it was only because the Eels made an error trying to get the ball out of their quarter, and I think from memory that was one where they got tackled into touch. I'm not quite sure how they got tackled into touch, but they did. I think there is something that the Eels can take out of those periods of being competitive with them, but they will have to, if they come up against them somewhere in the final series, they will have to ensure that they complete their sets, because if there was a criticism of the Eels from that game, it was that they just didn't complete their sets. Their resilience was amazing. Their completions, not so.
Yeah. And Canterbury's 36-0 victory actually kept them ahead of the Roosters Indigenous Academy, who won 52-0 against the Dragons. And in terms of the top of the ladder, Sixties became razor close. Razor thin margin there. 232 points differential for the Bulldogs to 224 for the Indigenous Academy. So 8 points separating the two best teams in this competition. At the end of 9 rounds, 8 games, won by a piece there. And we can see in finals you often see upsets happen. And we saw last year as well with, I believe, some upsets in the Tarsha Gale with the Newcastle Knights, I believe, taking it out. But the the Bulldogs and the Roosters would have to be the runaway favourites to be in the big dance as it stands right now. They are two tremendous rosters, and if I had to call my shot right now, I'd say Canterbury couldn't be touched the way they play.
I'd say so as well. They play a different brand of football. Canterbury are a bit more physical than the Roosters as far as I'm concerned. So that will be interesting. But we also had the Harold Matthews and the SG Ball in action at Eric Tweedale Stadium at Granville. Great venue for rugby league there, just to give people a bit of an idea, because there may well be that Parramatta plays quite a few more junior representative games there next year. But it's got a stand there I think it holds about 750 or something like that. It's quite spacious. It hasn't got the seats. It's got the tiered concrete. So you'd bring along a cushion, something like that, to sit on. But at the top of the stand, there is a level that contains a large function room. And the Eels put on a bit of a spread for the parents of all the players that were there on Saturday, which was nice to see. And there are 4 dressing sheds there as well, which makes it possible, if you've got a program with the male and female players, that you can have the female players in separate dressing sheds, and you don't have to worry about any crossover and that in terms of the use of the sheds. So that's great. There is beside the stand, there is a hill that goes all the way around the field. So there's parking, off-street parking there as well. I mean, not the size of the off-street parking that you have up at Kellyville Park, but there is still a decent amount of off-street parking.
Fair, yeah.
Yeah. So, look, the teams themselves, they got the job done.
That's probably how you sum it up.
Above, yeah. They were a class above the opposition, but there was there was a bit of spirited opposition from the Central Coast Roosters against the Harold Mats and the Storm against the SG Ball. They were both lower down on the table. You'd expect the Eels to get the job done. They got the job done. The Eels have now finished 4th in the SG Ball.
Correct.
And they'll play the West Magpies. They finished 3rd in the Mats. They'll play the Sharks. And we should mention that in finishing 5th, the Gale team will play the Steelers. And all of those matches will be at Campbelltown Stadium Saturday week. There is no junior football this weekend over Easter.
Mm-hmm. And that's the weekend wrap. 60s. You mentioned that Eric Tweedale Stadium is prospectively the home of our junior football for the near future until the Kellyville Park development is complete, which is fantastic because it is a nice little centre there. Let's get into the NRL news proper, starting with the Parramatta-related things. And we'll start with the NRLW, boys, because there's been a lot of moves everywhere, save for Parramatta. What's going on there? Eels have lost Simona Taufa to the Raiders, Gail Broughton to the Brisbane Broncos, both obviously big losses there. But the Broughton one, I think, isn't unexpected, given I believe her partner lives up there. So, I mean, that's a move of convenience as well as opportunity. But Taufa, a big loss to the Raiders. She's going to be the centerpiece for that team in expansion. Why aren't the Parramatta Eels making big moves?
Clint, I'll let you take the lead on all these news items because I know you're very strong on what's been happening in the NRL over the last week. So I'll let you kick off here.
Oh, look, just on the NRLW, I think what we're seeing is some of those expansion teams certainly want to make a statement and make some moves. It's probably not too different to what we experience with the men's team, in that the Eels run a very tight ship, and you don't hear about things until the Eels administration decide that you need to hear about it. So there's undoubtedly some things that are taking place in the background. I'm sure we'll hear some announcements in the not too near future. Kennedy Sherrington hinted as such that she's got a long-term extension, a long-term contract on the table, that I should say, that potentially up to 3 years. So I've no doubt there's some news coming up in the NRLW. It's just a matter of sitting tight and waiting.
That is a lone piece of great news for the Eels, is that rumoured 3-year extension for Kennedy Sherrington, who, if you're talking about building block players, don't get much better. She plays with high quality and high spirit. she's going to be the cultural heart of his team moving forwards. But it's going to be interesting to see who they surround her with.
Yeah,
would
absolutely.
Would you think that she's going to be named captain or at least a co-captain?
Oh, 100%, no doubt.
Well, with the movement of Taufi, you'd have to, she's a natural successor.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, and she makes plenty of sense for me as the build-around player. It's just interesting to see what they're going to do because all the marquee experienced talent seems to be rapidly coming off the market. We know the Eels have Tasha Gale talent and already postgraduate Tasha Gale talent that was in essentially the NRLW development squad in 2022 that they do like, but you'd want to have a bit of experience and maybe a bit of marquee power around them, but have to wait and see what they do.
I think what we'd like to see as fans is something in the way of recruitment rather than retention, just a little bit of recruitment where maybe we make a bit of damage in the player market as well.
I think that's fair, 60s. And speaking of recruitment, the big name in the NRL on everyone's lips right now is Jack Wighton. He has been linked to the Parramatta Eels. They do have a hole at centre. They're looking for an X-Factor player. All those pieces fit, save for maybe the biggest one, and that's the dollar value that the competition might be assigning him, boys, because Parramatta's interest you'd think would be legitimate. You always kick the tires on talented players, but as we record tonight on Tuesday, the 4th of April, it's believed that Canberra have just offered their 5/8 a mammoth $4.4 million over 4 years, which probably puts him out of Parramatta's price range at 1.1 per. Did he get what he want? Is that the crux of the matter here, where the Parramatta Eels or any other club a real chance for that matter, or was this all about getting that big golden handshake deal out of his club one final time?
Look, I think so. 40. It's players and managers know the game that's taking place here. And every manager and every player has a buddy in the media. It's pretty classic news cycle for this to take place, but it would be remiss of us not to entertain the possibility of Jack and what he could do for our team. And I think with the left centre position being I guess up for contention at the moment and a point of discussion within the Parramatta NRL side. If the possibility of Jack Wighton joining us and on reasonable money, on fair money for him and us, it would be silly not to entertain it. But as far as I'm concerned, this is just a matter of Jack exploring his options for the sake of using it for leverage to get one last payday, and it sounds like he may potentially got it.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Clint. I think as far as Parramatta were concerned, they would have been doing their due diligence in having a chat to him, but the way that offer seems to have come from the Canberra Raiders now, you just go, well, he's got what he wanted.
From a Parramatta perspective, boys, if we just pretend that the Raiders offer didn't exist ever and he was still on the open market, what would have been the right offer for the Blue and Gold to make to him as a centre?
800.
Yeah,
3
I
years?
would put it at that figure as well. You're not just paying for someone of his quality. Obviously he can play 6. He's played 1 plenty of times in his career as well. This is an Origin player. We're talking a representative player, so there's a tax and add-on fees for that. But yeah, I think 800 is where you draw the line, and if that wasn't enough, then both parties shake hands, move on.
Yeah, and in terms of the length of the contract, I think to attract him, you'd probably have to offer 3 years.
3 to 4 years, almost certainly, yeah. So.
Yeah. But of course, then what that comes, there's a particular cost that would come at, which would be that it may will signal the end of players like Sean Russell sticking around at the club, because if you were to sign someone like a Jack Wighton for an extended period at the club after you've also extended the contract of Sevo, after you've extended the contract of Will Pensini, and also Hayes is someone who the club values, and they like, BA likes what Hayes produces. So you'd have to say the opportunities for outside backs would be greatly diminished by for outside backs at the club, currently at the club, ones in the pathways or ones that have just come out of the pathways, that the more that you sign established players like that, the less opportunity there is. And so you start to lose players maybe that you don't want to lose. But I guess that's the call that you have to make, isn't it? Because ultimately what supporters want to see is a premiership.
Yeah, above
and
all.
We've all got favourite players, and we've all got players that we'd like to see in first grade, and we don't always agree on the players you'd like to see there. But what we all agree on is we want to see the club win a premiership and win one soon.
Yes, sir. And speaking of the player that Jack Wighton would have prospectively replaced at Parramatta, Wanga Blake, up until this week, the current left centre at the club, he's been linked by Fox Sports to Rugby Union boys. Is that a bit of manager talk there? Is that a bit of Rugby Union speculation? Or is that something you can definitely see on the cards with Wanga being a free agent at the end of his season?
Oh, look, Wonga's manager has a responsibility to him to explore his options. You know, the writing is probably on the wall for Wanga at the moment. He's very much at that fork in the road, and you know, I think we all agree. You know, there's no doubting the athletic ability of Wanga Blake. He's one of the most impressive athletes in the competition, and anyone who's seen him train knows that he's a specimen. His acceleration off the mark and his ability to maintain top speed is incredibly impressive. And him at the top of his game is an absolute asset to our team. But as of late, and you could argue going back to the back end of last year that he hasn't quite been the same headspace wise since being under the high ball from Nathan Cleary, and he's lacking confidence at the moment. And you know, a strong Wanga Blake is strong for Parramatta, but you know they've got to protect their asset, and the manager and Wanga in this instance exploring their opportunities and possibilities, and Union seems to be one of those things. I think Super League has also been speculated over the past couple of weeks as well. I take it's likely because they've put the feelers out for NRL contracts at the moment. There isn't any nibbles.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that I can recall over the last few years with player swaps around rugby union was what Sam Burgess said about his time playing in the centres over in English rugby union. He said he'd come off the field, he maybe would have made 2 or 3 runs, 4 tackles, and people would be patting him on the back about what a strong game he had. And he'd be just thinking to himself, what on earth are they talking about? And look, I think with regard to Wanga, if I was speaking to Wanga, I'd be reminding him that over the years there's been many players who have had to take that drop down to New South Wales Cup level, and they've taken it in their stride and they've looked to produce their best from there. Now, I can remember, and I can't remember which one of I can't recall which one of the twins it was, but watching one of the Morris twins playing for the Bulldogs at Ringrose Park, and he'd been dropped for form, and he absolutely carved Wenty to pieces when Wenty was the feeder team, the New South Wales Cup team for Parramatta. He put on the sort of display. He looked like an international player having to play against New South Wales Cup level players. Like, it looked exactly what it was. And there are times when players who are first graders get dropped back to the level below, and they play at the level below. Like, they play to whatever level that they're playing in. The real quality players make a statement when they go back. And I'd like Wanga to feel confident in his own ability, understand and believe in himself that he is a player worthy of NRL who is playing at a lower grade level, and that he, set out to prove to others that he is going to be back in the NRL at some stage soon. And that, I think that's all I can ask of him. And I guess within the team construct, that he makes sure that he does his job. Don't necessarily overplay his hand individually, but have confidence in himself, play his role as he needs to at cup level, and he'll excel.
And the last bit of news, boys, that isn't directly tied to Parramatta, but I thought it would be interesting to have a chat about it with you boys, given some of our inferred recruitment or attempts during the off-season. But the Roosters are looking at potentially squeezing club legend Jarrod Waerea-Hargreaves out at the end of the season as they feel the pinch of new recruit Spencer Leniu and Joseph Swaley is still on the books for next year, but also who's the other boy they got? Leniu and obviously Dom Young. So they've loaded up for 2024, and Waerea-Hargreaves might be the man to make the way. Given that we had interest in Marty Tapa'u before he did the not dodgy, but last second back out for us with the Brisbane Broncos, should the Parramatta Eels be kicking the tyres on Waerea-Hargreaves and have a cheeky little look-see if he can be the senior third party for Junior and Reg off the bench?
I can sense Clint has the pen in his hand, ready to sign a check.
Yeah, it's a matter of dollars. This is a matter of money. This isn't a matter of yes or no. This is a matter of where do we draw the line in terms of how much cash we're willing to offer. A resounding yes. Jarrod's not the player that he used to be, and he's getting a little bit long in the tooth now. But geez, a quality 30, 40 minutes every week from him, coming off the bench and just playing those relief minutes. We're not going to lose much in that. And, particularly when you consider the caliber of players that come off the bench for other NRL sides, yeah, I would absolutely entertain this, And look, it'd probably be pretty hard to get it to convince Jarrod with a 1-year deal for it. You probably might have to put a mutual option in there for a second to get it over the line. But, because there's also considerations on, I'm not too sure, just like the rest of the NRL fraternity, what the Roosters salary cap situation is. I have an opinion on what it is. But they're probably in a, whether he qualifies for a long-term player discount or anything there, that might factor into the negotiation. We're all well aware of the off-field opportunities that get offered to Roosters players. So it'd have to be a decent offer to entice him, and there'd have to be some decent terms to that offer to entice him. So, look, I'm thinking we probably have to offer a 1-year deal with a mutual option for a second. Probably not too dissimilar to what we did with Josh Hodgson. And I'd probably be looking. I'd be looking towards a $500,000 a year check for Jarrod to come do that role.
Yeah, it's straight, simple for me. Talk to him, try and get something done, and if it's possible within the money that the Eels have available, fantastic. If it's not possible, well, we understand why, because we've seen where we've been spending money lately. But we do know that the Eels are in the market for a centre. They're in the market for middles, and they've got a little bit of money to spend, obviously. So he's someone to talk to, even if it has to be for next year. Now, mate, there is still some other NRL news floating around that we want to get to. I know Clint's got a few things he's keen to talk about. Surely there's one of them as well that almost requires the Benny Hill stinger.
Oh God, well, we'll get to that. We'll break out the Benny Hill stinger in a little bit, but let's start with some real top tier news in terms of the player involved. But the Brisbane Broncos high flying at the start of 2023, undefeated on top of the ladder. Big part of that is their prop forward sensation Payne Haas, who is set to become the richest ever Bronco ever. Clint, he's off contract at the end of 2024, which means he's eligible to negotiate now, but I don't think he's going to hit the market.
Pretty sensational when you consider 12 months ago, maybe 18 months ago, Payne Haas wanted out of Brisbane. Yeah. And there was a lot of innuendo and suggestion that he was going to make a mid-season switch to the Roosters. For this to sort of come full circle, that to settle down and to placate some of the grievances, I guess, Payne had that potentially led to that scenario, and then look to extend and become the richest Bronco ever. It's probably a fair reflection of the cultural transition Brisbane has gone through during that period, and look, I think it's probably a good reflection of some of the off-field recruitment the Broncos have done, and getting their house in order off-field. That's that's facilitated an environment that's made this a possibility.
And probably the one criticism in terms of him as a player on the field, obviously off the field there's some stuff to still negotiate and navigate, but on the field was that he lacked a good offload or ability to play before the line. That looks to be something he's worked on this preseason, and he seems to be the full package now. He is absolutely devastating out there.
But he provides that go forward that gets the Broncos back, so we know what their back line is capable of doing. But when he is part of that successful formula of winning the middle, it opens up so much opportunity for their outside back talent.
All right, well, you sort of teased at 60s. Let's get into it. But you can't really talk about this club without playing this music these days. Yes, it's time for the West Tigers, boys. And I know you don't want to give them bulletin board material before that Easter Monday game, but they just keep giving it to us to talk about in the podcast. So let's get into it this week with classic Tigers segments from their jersey design team and CEO Justin Pascoe. Let's start with the jersey, the Anzac jersey as it were. And this is not breaking, but it's sort of been developing throughout the day. But it looks like that their 2023 Anzac jersey has, of all things, a what's the word I'm looking for here, boys? A stock military image of US troops that's been superimposed onto the jersey. So it's been a failure catastrophically at some level, if it's true, because I've seen the stock image and I've seen the jersey and it looks true. But that quality control has failed the Tigers here.
On a number of levels.
Yeah, on a number of levels.
A number of levels. You know, when you consider the process, and we were discussing this earlier when this issue came to light, is the approval process a jersey has to go through before it actually takes the field. It has to pass a number of hands. You know, so you have the apparel manufacturer who mocks up the design and does that in consultation generally with the club's graphic designer and marketing team. Then it goes through to the C-level executives there who approve that. It goes off to licensing at the NRL, who then approves that. Then it goes into production, takes the field. It's past a lot of people's eyes. So to get to that, to get to this point where if it is in fact what they wear on the field, then you hit the nail on the head there. 40s errors of that are absolutely catastrophic to get to that level. And you know, it's when it rains it pours, right? You know, and there's probably a little bit of a stack on the Tigers, and it's a position that we're not too unfamiliar with ourselves as Eels supporters. You know, it was 10 years ago wasn't that long ago in the memories of a rugby league fan. And while a lot of water has passed under the bridge since that time, you know, I'm sure there's some Eels fans that can empathise with some of the plights of the Tigers at the moment, but they just can't seem to take a trick. And you know, I'm loath to stick the knife in when we got a game coming up against them. Rugby league gods, please leave us alone just for this week. But they just can't take a trick. And you know, it's worth noting that it feels like it doesn't have to be said, but I think we should say it anyway. There's a level of disrespect on so many levels for this to happen. You know, both from an Anzac perspective, from a U.S. Armed Forces perspective, from the professionalism of the work or lack thereof undertaken that led to this being produced. I don't know where to start, and
I don't know what the solution is going to be, because if this, as we said, if this is the case, and this is a developing story, and I'm not sure that there's been too much in the way of official statements that have been made. There was something floating around about the West Tigers saying that they worked in conjunction with the Holsworthy Army base in terms of designing the jersey. That was something that I thought was floating around a little bit earlier. I could be corrected on that, but just as an example, this only happened most recently with the Parramatta Eels. A lot of Parramatta supporters, did not like the Parramatta Eels poppy jersey. Now, if you think back to that, one of the problems that existed with that poppy jersey is we had to reverse the colours. And because in that that was originally designed as a home jersey. And as it turned out, it was an away match that the jersey was going to be worn on. So they had to go to the alternate colour. And that was part of that review process, because it's everything to do with, okay, is this a home match? Is it an away match? What colours are you using? Are we happy with the design that's there? There's all this review process that goes on. We were subjected to that. We had to make a change. We had to manufacture a jersey that was different to the original plan, but that was picked up in all that check process, so that then the jersey was manufactured and it was available for sale prior to the match. Now, this is the jersey that has now been manufactured for the West Tigers. Where do they go to? If this is the stuff up that it looks like, what do they do? Surely they don't wear that jersey in the match. Surely. Like, do they then revert to the previous year's jersey? That would be my thought. Because you can't stand out there on Anzac Day if they are wearing images that aren't of Australian Armed Forces. So, hey, I think it'll be quite an interesting story to follow over the next week or so, because it really comes down to logistics, doesn't it? What is available to them?
Yep.
Yep.
And when this has come out, it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's that the jersey is still available for sale. They still have it on. I believe
it is. Yeah, it was launched yesterday, I think. So
yeah,
I'm pretty certain you can still get it on their online store. So, and on a much minor scale of embarrassing was CEO Justin Pascoe out there peacocking it in the first grade warm up against the Broncos. He was spied in a club polo and whatnot out in the field with the players. They started to warm up. And then later he was caught. I mean, I don't know about this one, but he was caught on the phone in the dressing room at halftime, and people were accusing him of not being, if you're going to be in the dressing room, sort of respect the sanctity of it and, listen to the coach and watch the plays, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of Pascoe failures, it's definitely on the minor scale. But yeah, it's also not great for the club when you need to be professional from the top down, don't you?
It's just a little tone deaf.
Yeah, exactly. Quite. That's probably the cleanest way of describing it.
There seems to be a lack of awareness of the wider public perception there. And, look, C-level executive is not meant to concern themselves with the thoughts and the thought process of the average punter, but they are meant to read the room and understand that these punters are also their stakeholders and their investors. And I'm probably using a little bit more technical terminology there, but a season ticket holder, remember, is an investor in the club. Someone who even if you're not someone who's buying a season ticket, you're a casual fan buying merchandise. You have a level of investment in the club. You put your money into the club. You want to know that your club's being well represented. To be caught on camera in the warm up in the club polo. And then subsequently at halftime texting. Look, he probably was. It was that in itself is innocent, but it's a lack of awareness of the current situation and how that could be potentially interpreted. My advice and suggestion would be just get yourself away from the cameras, Justin. Keep yourself out of the spotlight. And work on some small wins, because it unfortunately for him, it's starting to compound and what is being perceived as a credibility problem.
I wonder how many CEOs would be in that situation of being out on the field in the warm up, of being in the dressing sheds with a phone at halftime. You said.
I believe it was halftime.
Yeah. Now, the other question too is, how many NRL coaches would find it acceptable to have their CEO doing those things? I would guarantee there's a lot of very strong-willed, strong-minded NRL coaches who wouldn't have a bar of it and would not be adverse to telling their CEO, even though it's their CEO, mate, this isn't your area. Please respect the work area of the players. So,
look, if you're to make a comparison, to the everyday office worker, their CEO isn't micromanaging, or maybe in some cases they are, but generally speaking, the CEO has got a lot of things on their plate that they're not sitting over the shoulder of you as you're going about your day-to-day work, just hanging about. They're normally taking care of other things, or even if they're not, they look like they are.
Yeah, they've got, given the sort of money that they're on, their time is far better spent doing other things.
And to that point, is that the best use of Justin's time? That's probably what's at the heart of the issue. You add this to a growing list of gaps. We're talking about a CEO who also finds time to I'm not sure the frequency of it. I think it might be monthly. It might be more frequent than that. But produce his own podcasts through the club's media streams as well. If you're a Tigers fan, you're asking the question, when are you doing CEO work?
I guess what we're seeing from him almost is he's playing the role of a fan when he's the CEO. So it's
hard not to view it that way. And look, this is not meant to be an indictment on Justin Pascoe doing or not doing his job per se. We're not suggesting that he isn't doing and fulfilling some, the duties of the CEO for all the time that he's away from the camera. But it's just a mindfulness piece and being able to read the room. Mentioned before, it's tone deaf. You've got to understand the circumstances of the club. It's being in touch with your fans and understanding how things can be interpreted rightly or wrongly. For me, it's probably a little bit of an EQ piece, a little bit of a emotional intelligence, emotional awareness piece. And if I was him and if I was on the board of the West Tigers, and I wanted to, and you're hellbent on continuing with Justin as your man, it's probably worth investing in some consultants to help work on his image and do that development work. If he's someone that you want to persist with, if you believe in your leader, you as the board need to identify, okay, look, there's some opportunities to develop and grow here. We believe in you. We want to nurture you through this. But part of you continuing on here as our leader is that you have to do this.
I'd like to summarise how I see this whole situation, which is Justin Pascoe has always been renowned for marching to the beat of a different drum. It's just that I don't think it's always music to the ears of West Tigers fans.
And probably not a consistent tempo too on that drum. So, yeah, let's move on, boys. With I want to say a feel-good story in the context of the NRL, but I don't know how feel-good it can be when the poor Canberra Raiders are taking on the red-hot Brisbane Broncos and probably staring down the barrel of a second 50-point loss in as many weeks. But in terms of the feel-good stakes, Ricky Stewart has recalled club stalwart Jarrod Croker, boys. He comes back into the centres for NRL cap 293 this week. So he's set to be minted in a handful of games if he stays in the NRL as the game's next 300-game player, one of the all-time leading point scorers as well. He has scored an absolutely metric bucket load between tries and conversions. But yeah, I mean, I say feel good. It would be nice to see Jarrod get his 300th cap. He has been huge for them for a whole number of years. Obviously, his form was trailed off, in particular in his defensive side of the game, where he struggled to keep some of those monsters that are out in the centres these days in check on the opposition lineups. But yeah, a chance to become a 300 cap player, and maybe he can give the Raiders a little something to unseat the Broncos.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting development, isn't it? And good on Jarrod. It's as you touched on. He's the player next in line to become, or he's in line to become the next 300 gamer, I should say. Jesse Bromwich, obviously, from the Dolphins being the most recent one. And that's a big deal. 300 NRL games is a big deal. One NRL game is a big deal when you really think about what it takes to get there. 300 is monumental, and it would be great to see Jarrod get to that milestone. As a neutral fan, I think he's one of the real likable, respectable people in rugby league. He's always come across as very well spoken. We remember early in his career the miss he had in that elimination semi-final down in Canberra, and wearing the weight of that, but coming back stronger than ever. And there was a period of time in his career that he was considered as a potential origin smoker. He was probably that the defensive side of his game that you touched on there that inevitably prevented him from reaching those heights. But he's been a very loyal player for that club. He's been probably the face of that club until recent years when sort of transitioned across to Jack Wighton. He represents a lot of the good in rugby league, and I wish him well. I hope he gets to 300.
My take on this is that obviously he's going to have the right form to stay in first grade. Maybe he's able to rise to those levels. I'm not sure. If the Raiders are out of contention later in the season, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ricky Stewart bring him back up.
Yeah, no reason not to.
Yeah. Now,
absolutely.
What I mentioned this when we were talking before about Wong and Blake going back to New South Wales Cup, and I mentioned about the one of the Morris twins playing for the Bulldogs out at Ringrose Park and how great he played. Last year, I was able to watch Jarrod Croker running around for the Raiders against the Eels up at Kellyville Park. Now, to be honest, I mean, the Kellyville Park facility is not built as yet. It's not a match venue as such in terms of being any sort of stadium or having the facilities around it that you would expect that a player with that sort of pedigree, that sort of heritage that he's had through his time at the Raiders, I just wouldn't have expected to see him running around at Kellyville Park on a Sunday afternoon. But that's exactly what I saw. And can I tell you, he was the class player on the field in that game. The Raiders won that game, and he just put on an absolute masterclass in centre play, in goal kicking. It was actually quite an honour to be able to watch it close up like you do on a field like at Kellyville Park. So he's one who obviously we're not watching the Canberra Raiders reserve grade games. Raiders fans will be better able to let us know how he's playing in New South Wales Cup on a regular basis. But that day I saw a player who gave his best football playing in New South Wales Cup. And if he's been doing that, then he well and truly deserves his recall to first grade.
And Clint, you actually just jogged my memory by mentioning the most recent inductee to the 300 Club, and Jesse Bromwich, who has obviously done a tremendous job getting to that milestone. But NRL.com ran an article on him in the lead up to that game into his massive, triple ton there. And they mentioned that one other milestone he'll be chasing this year, and it actually pertains to a former Parramatta Eel. And this is a testament to the legacy of this player. So Jesse Bromwich, at 300 games in his NRL career, has started, as of last round, 278 in the front row. And that's not actually the NRL era, or not even NRL era, but pre-NRL era record. The most recorded starts or starting caps in the front row as it stands is actually Bob O'Reilly, boys. 282 of his 286 caps were starting as a bookend. So you talk about a testament to toughness, and obviously Jesse's going to take over that mantle shortly in this season, pending any sort of injury. But yeah, wow, Bob O'Reilly, what a formidable unit he was, in terms of consistency, reliability, and just the knack of being able to stay healthy and play those games as a starting bookend in an era where scrums were a little bit different. So
if you could get through a match where you weren't punched in the face, I think you were doing pretty well. And yeah, it was let's face it, the early part of his career spent at the Eels, and I think he would have debuted in about, off the top of my head, about 1967 or something like that. And he came into a team that had the likes of Ron Lynch and Dick Thornett, Brian Hambley. They were the sort of players that would have looked after an 18-year-old prop starting in the game. But to go through that era of football, though, this is the time where the players stayed on the field for the 80 minutes. So it's not just starting the game; it would have been ending the game as well. So it'd be an interesting stat to look back, and they wouldn't. I doubt that they'd have it from back in those days, but I would imagine that the number of games started at prop and ending at prop would be not there wouldn't be a huge differential between them, except maybe for send-offs.
And of course, 60s, we've had a chance to chat to the Bear a number of times, officially as part of TCT and unofficially as fans, and he is a wonderful gentleman of the game.
Mate, he's he is just, he's just so great a fella. And you mentioned that we've had the chance to speak to him. We recorded one of our earliest interviews with him at his house. I went and visited a number of times before and after we did the recording. I was made to feel so welcome there. I met him as a kid when he worked with my father as they were both lorry owner drivers. They used to cart blocks for what was called Marley. Back then, they were manufacturers of concrete building blocks, and the trucks used to carry these blocks around the building sites. And they didn't have those cranes on the back lifting pallets of blocks or bricks off. It was all done by hand back in those days. So it was hard yakka, but it was the sort of yakka that worked out well for players because they could work the hours that would suit them to be able to get to training later in the day. And I've had the honour of speaking to him quite a number of times over the years, and just ringing him every so often just to say g'day and catch up. And great bloke.
Let's put a bow on this one, boys, as we get back to the multi-pike podcast weekly format. I hope you guys enjoyed myself and 60s rambling on, joined by the more sane conversational pieces of Clint. You did a wonderful job on debut official. Well, not on debut, but on debut of the weekly podcast, mate. You've done a great job in the past filling in for the live show and also, like I said, the long-form content on the site. And I hope our listeners look forward to Quint being part of us or part of this podcast moving forwards.
Thanks, gentlemen. It was a pleasure.
Mate, it's yes, we've enjoyed having you on. We're looking forward to the season ahead that we have in what should be. Let's talk about it. We'll talk about more of it on the preview podcast. A win for the Eels coming up this week, and we'll be able to speak to you next week about all the news that comes out of the Easter weekend of football, and not just in the Parramatta Eels, but across the NRL. So thanks for joining us, Clint. And as always, go you Eels.
Catch you guys in the next episode.